I was the only one who took care of my parents in their final years. When they passed and left me their house, my sister forged every document claiming she was the one owed everything instead. I stared at the electricity bill in my hands, reading the address 3 times before it sank in. The house was mine from the will. I already had estate mail and notices coming to this address, but somehow the utilities were being switched to someone else's name, someone who lives 2 states away and has no reason to be on my utility account. The bill was addressed to Rebecca Hartwell, my sister. I walked through the living room where Dad's leather recliner used to sit. The indent in the carpet was still there, a perfect rectangle of deeper pile where his chair had been for 23 years. Now there was just empty space and a few dust bunnies I kept meaning to vacuum up. Mom's china cabinet had vanished sometime last week. I'd noticed it was gone, but figured Rebecca had just moved it to make room for the moving boxes we'd been sorting through. Except we weren't moving. I was staying. This was my house now. The grandfather clock that had chimed every hour since I was 6 years old was missing too. So was the antique dining table Mom had inherited from her mother. Even the good silverware was gone. The set she'd only brought out for Christmas and Easter, wrapped in that soft gray cloth that smelled like mothballs. I pulled out my phone and called Rebecca. "Hey, little brother," she answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice had that breezy, dismissive tone she'd perfected in high school. "What's up? Where's Mom's china cabinet?" "Oh, that old thing? I had it appraised. The guy said it was worth decent money, so I took it to an auction house. We can split whatever it brings in." My grip tightened on the phone. You can't just sell Mom's furniture. Why not? It's not like you need all this stuff rattling around in that big house. Besides, I'm handling all the estate paperwork, remember? It's easier if I just take care of everything. I wanted to argue, but Rebecca had always been better with words than me. She could twist any conversation until I felt like the unreasonable one. Even now, standing in my own living room, I felt that familiar doubt creeping in. "What about the electricity bill?" I asked. "Why is it in your name?" A pause. "Oh, that. I had to put the utilities in my name temporarily while we sort out the estate stuff. There were some issues with the power company about transferring everything over. Don't worry about it. I'll switch it back once all the legal stuff is finalized." That made sense, I guess. Rebecca had always been the one to handle complicated paperwork. When Dad had his stroke 3 years ago, she'd been the one to navigate the insurance claims and Medicare maze. When Mom started forgetting things, Rebecca had set up all the doctor's appointments and sorted through the prescriptions. I'd just been the one who drove them to appointments, picked up groceries, fixed the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom, and sat with them during the long nights when they couldn't sleep. "I'm driving down next weekend to help pack up more stuff," Rebecca continued. "We really need to get serious about clearing things out. That house is way too big for one person." After we hung up, I walked upstairs to my parents' bedroom. It felt wrong being in there, like I was trespassing, but I needed to check something. I opened Mom's jewelry box, the small wooden one with the ballerina that spun when you lifted the lid. Empty. Her wedding ring was gone. So was the pearl necklace Dad had given her for their anniversary, and the small diamond earrings she'd worn to church every Sunday. Even the cheap costume jewelry she'd collected over the years had vanished. I sat on the edge of their bed, my hands shaking slightly as I reached for the stack of papers on Mom's nightstand. Bills, mostly, but also documents I didn't remember seeing before. Transfer forms, mortgage refinancing paperwork, a deed transfer application with my signature at the bottom. My signature, but I didn't remember signing it. I flipped through the pages, scanning for details I should have paid attention to weeks ago, when Rebecca had spread them across the kitchen table and handed me a pen. She'd explained that everything needed to be transferred into the estate's name temporarily, that it was just a formality while the will went through probate. "Just sign here, here, and here," she'd said, pointing to the signature lines. "I know it's a lot of legal jargon, but trust me, I've been through this process with friends who lost their parents. This is how it works." I'd trusted her. Of course I had. She was my sister, and she'd been handling all the complicated stuff since the funeral. I'd been too exhausted from grief and too overwhelmed by suddenly living alone in the house where I'd grown up to question anything. But now, reading more carefully, I saw phrases that made my stomach drop. Transfer of ownership, relinquishment of rights, irrevocable assignment. I grabbed my laptop and opened my email. There, buried between spam messages and sympathy cards from neighbors, was an email from something called Hartwell Property Management. The subject line read, "Upcoming property inspection, 1247 Maple Street." My address. The email was sent to Rebecca, but I was CC'd. It talked about preparing the property for market, scheduling a realtor walkthrough, and finalizing the listing agreement. My house was being sold. I called Rebecca back. This time she didn't answer. I tried again an hour later, then again after dinner. Finally, at almost 10 o'clock, she picked up. "You've been calling me all evening?" she said without preamble. "What's going on? Are you selling the house?" "Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about this. You can't afford to keep it up on your own, and it makes sense to sell while the market's good. We'll split the proceeds 50-50, of course. But the will left the house to me." Another pause. Longer this time. "Right. But like I explained, there are a lot of legal complications with estate transfers. The house has to go through the estate first before it can be officially transferred to you. And honestly, once you see all the costs involved, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, you'll realize it's better to just sell it and take the cash." I wanted to argue, but I'd never been good at confrontation. Rebecca had always been the confident one, the one who knew how things worked in the real world. I'd spent most of my 20s taking care of our parents while she built her career in real estate 2 states away. "I don't want to sell," I said finally. "Look, I know it's emotional, but you need to be practical. This house is worth almost $400,000. That's enough to buy yourself a nice condo somewhere with lower taxes and no maintenance headaches. You could finally start living your own life instead of being stuck in that old house with all those memories." She made it sound like a gift, like she was doing me a favor by taking away the only home I'd ever known. "I need to see the paperwork," I said. "All of it." "Of course. I'll bring copies of everything when I come down this weekend. We can go through it all together." But I didn't want to wait until the weekend. After we hung up, I drove to the county courthouse. It was closed, but I could go first thing Monday morning and look up the deed records myself. myself. I spent the rest of the weekend walking through the empty rooms of my house, making lists of everything that was missing: the grandfather clock, Mom's china cabinet, Dad's collection of baseball cards, the family photos that had hung in the hallway for decades. Even small things were gone: Mom's favorite coffee mug, the kitchen timer she'd used every day, the throw pillows from the living room couch. It felt like the house was being erased, piece by piece, memory by memory. Monday morning, I was waiting outside the courthouse when they opened. The clerk was helpful but slow, pulling up records on an ancient computer system that took forever to load each page. "Here we go," she said finally. "1247 Maple Street. Looks like there was a deed transfer filed about 3 weeks ago." She turned the monitor toward me. There was my signature at the bottom, listed as heir. The filing showed the property transferred from my parents' estate to something called Hartwell Family Trust. "Who's the trustee?" I asked. She scrolled down. "Rebecca Hartwell. That's probably your wife or my sister." The clerk nodded sympathetically. "Family estate planning can get complicated. At least you've got someone you trust handling everything." I thanked her and walked back to my car, my hands shaking as I tried to process what I'd just learned. Rebecca didn't just have temporary control of the house for probate purposes. She owned it, completely and legally. And I had signed it over to her myself. I should have seen this coming. The signs were all there, stretching back 28 years to when Rebecca was born and suddenly became the center of our parents' universe. She was the first grandchild, the first daughter, the one who could do no wrong. I came along 3 years later as an afterthought, the backup kid, the one who'd better not cause any trouble because Rebecca was already providing enough excitement for everyone. Growing up, Rebecca got piano lessons while I got chores. She got college prep tutoring while I got a part-time job to help pay for her tutoring. When she wanted to study abroad junior year, Mom and Dad emptied their savings account. When I wanted to take a gap year after high school to figure out what I actually wanted to do with my life, they told me I needed to be more responsible and think about my future. So I stayed home, went to community college, and got a degree in something practical and boring. Rebecca got her communications degree from a fancy university and moved to California to find herself. She found herself a job in real estate and a husband who owned 3 vacation rental properties. Meanwhile, I found myself taking care of our aging parents. It started small. Dad's arthritis made it hard for him to change light bulbs or carry heavy groceries. Mom began forgetting appointments and losing her car keys. Rebecca would visit twice a year, usually around holidays, and spend most of the time taking photos for her social media accounts. "Look at me with Mom and Dad," she'd post, arm around them both, grinning at the camera. The comments would pour in about what a devoted daughter she was, how lucky our parents were to have such a caring child. Nobody saw me in the background doing dishes or sorting pill organizers. When Dad had his first stroke, Rebecca flew out for 4 days. She spent most of that time on phone calls with her husband and real estate clients, pacing around the hospital waiting room and talking loudly about square footage and closing dates. I spent 3 weeks sleeping in the chair next to Dad's bed, learning to help him relearn basic words and motor functions. "I wish I could stay longer," Rebecca said before flying back to California. "But I have this huge deal closing next week, and my clients are depending on me." Our parents understood. They always understood when it came to Rebecca. Her career was important. Her life was important. She was doing big things in the world. I was just the one who drove them to physical therapy appointments and learned how to cook meals that were soft enough for Dad to swallow. When Mom started showing signs of dementia, I moved back into my childhood bedroom. Temporarily, I told myself, just until we could figure out a better arrangement. Rebecca sent care packages and sympathy cards and called every Sunday to check in.
"You're such a saint," she'd tell me. "I don't know how you do it. I just don't have the patience for caregiving like you do."
Like it was a personality trait instead of something I'd been forced into by circumstances and family expectations. The temporary arrangement lasted 4 years. 4 years of sleepless nights when Mom wandered around the house looking for her own mother. 4 years of managing medications and doctor appointments and insurance claims. 4 years of watching Dad struggle to form sentences while his mind stayed sharp enough to know exactly what he was losing. Rebecca visited more often during those years, maybe every 3 months instead of twice a year. She'd breeze in with gifts from expensive stores and stories about her latest business successes. Mom and Dad would light up when she walked through the door, suddenly more animated than they'd been in weeks. "Tell us about California," Mom would say, forgetting that she'd asked the same question an hour earlier. Rebecca would launch into stories about celebrity clients and million-dollar listings, while I quietly refilled water glasses and adjusted Dad's wheelchair cushions. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with something that might have been pity or might have been smugness. It was hard to tell the difference. When Dad died last fall, Rebecca stayed for a week to help plan the funeral. She was amazing at it, honestly. She knew exactly how to talk to the funeral director, how to write an obituary that made Dad sound like a beloved family patriarch instead of a man who'd spent his final years frustrated by his own failing body. "We should have a celebration of life instead of a traditional funeral," she announced. Dad would have wanted something uplifting. She organized everything: the flowers, the catering, the photo displays. She even wrote and delivered a beautiful eulogy about growing up with such a wonderful father, about all the life lessons he'd taught her, about how he'd always believed in following your dreams. The whole time, I sat in the front row thinking about how Dad had spent his last good years asking me to help him to the bathroom and apologizing for being such a burden. After the funeral, Rebecca extended her stay to help get Mom settled. This mostly involved researching assisted living facilities and having serious conversations about Mom's future care needs. "She can't keep living in this big house," Rebecca said. "It's not safe, and it's not fair to expect you to keep taking care of of her indefinitely. I wanted to point out that I'd been taking care of her for 4 years already, but Rebecca was probably right. Mom was getting worse. Some days she didn't recognize me at all. Other days she'd call me by Dad's name and ask when he was coming home from work. But then Mom died 3 months later, suddenly and peacefully in her sleep. The assisted living conversation became irrelevant, replaced by funeral planning and estate lawyers, and the exhausting process of figuring out what to do with a lifetime's worth of accumulated stuff. The will reading was a surprise. I'd assumed everything would be split 50-50 between Rebecca and me, maybe with a slight edge to Rebecca since she was the eldest and had always been their favorite. Instead, the lawyer read out a document that left the house specifically to me. James Connor receives full ownership of the family residence at 1247 Maple Street, including all fixtures and improvements thereto. Rebecca's face went through several expressions in quick succession. Surprise, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite identify. What about the rest of the estate? She asked. The rest was split evenly between us. Bank accounts, investments, personal property. But the house was mine. The attorney also mentioned a few recent codicils had been added and said we'd each get the full packet by email. After the lawyer's office, Rebecca was quiet during the drive back to Maple Street. Finally, she said, "I guess Mom and Dad knew you'd been the one taking care of them." For the first time in my life, I felt like maybe my parents had actually seen me, not just as the reliable backup child, but as someone deserving of something significant, something that was mine alone. "I'm happy for you," Rebecca continued. "Really, you deserve it." And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my sister, and she just acknowledged that I'd earned something through years of sacrifice and caregiving. That night, sitting alone in the living room where I'd spent so many evenings helping Dad with his physical therapy exercises, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The house was mine. After 28 years of being the responsible one, the backup plan, the caretaker, I finally had something that was unquestionably, legally, completely mine. I should have known it was too good to last. Rebecca showed up the day after the will reading with a bottle of champagne and a stack of manila folders. "We need to celebrate," she announced, setting the bottle on the kitchen counter. "And then we need to get organized. There's so much paperwork to sort through." I was still processing the fact that the house was actually mine. Walking through the rooms felt different now, like I was seeing them as a homeowner instead of just someone temporarily staying in his childhood bedroom. The creaky floorboard by the bathroom wasn't just a familiar sound anymore. It was my creaky floorboard to fix or ignore as I pleased. "I brought copies of everything the lawyer gave us," Rebecca continued, spreading folders across the kitchen table, "plus some additional forms we'll need for the estate transfer process." The folders were labeled in her neat handwriting: probate documents, property transfer, tax forms, insurance updates. She'd been busy. "I talked to my real estate attorney back home," she said, pulling out a thick stack of papers. "He explained that even though the will is clear about you inheriting the house, there's still a whole legal process we have to follow. Everything has to go through the estate first, before it can be officially transferred to your name." That made sense, I guess. I didn't know anything about estate law. "The good news is that I can handle most of this for you," Rebecca said. "I deal with property transfers all the time in my work. No point in paying a lawyer when I already know how this stuff works." She handed me a pen and pointed to the first signature line. She'd even brought a mobile notary, calling it a standard probate requirement, so every signature was stamped and sealed. "This just establishes the estate trust and names me as the executor. It's temporary, just until all the legal stuff gets sorted out." I signed where she pointed. Then she flipped to the next page. "This one transfers the property into the estate's name temporarily. Again, just a formality." I signed that one too, and the next one, and the next. "You're so lucky I know how to handle this," Rebecca said, watching me sign. When my friend Victoria inherited her parents' house in Oregon, she tried to do it herself and ended up in legal limbo for 2 years. Cost her thousands in attorney fees. After an hour of signing documents, Rebecca packed everything back into her folders. "I'll get these filed with the appropriate offices," she said. "You just focus on taking care of yourself. You've been through enough stress." The champagne sat unopened on the counter. We'd gotten too busy with paperwork to celebrate. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca called regularly to update me on the estate process. There were complications with the county recorder's office, issues with the title company, problems with the insurance transfer that required additional documentation. "I hate to keep bothering you with this stuff," she'd say, "but I need a few more signatures." She'd email me PDFs to print and sign, or sometimes she'd drive down from her hotel to have me sign things in person, always with detailed explanations about legal requirements and government bureaucracy, and how grateful she was that I trusted her to handle everything. Meanwhile, strange things started happening around the house. The first thing I noticed was Mom's sewing machine disappearing from the upstairs bedroom. Rebecca explained that she'd taken it to be appraised. "I found a specialist who deals with vintage Singer machines," she said. "If it's worth anything significant, we should include it in the estate inventory for tax purposes." A week later, Dad's tool collection vanished from the garage. Another appraisal, Rebecca explained. The estate needed a complete inventory of valuable items. "I know it seems like I'm taking everything," she said during one of her visits, "but trust me, this is all standard procedure. We have to document and appraise everything before the estate can be officially closed." The grandfather clock disappeared next, then Mom's jewelry box, then the antique mirrors from the hallway. "I'm storing everything in a climate-controlled facility," Rebecca assured me. "We can't risk anything getting damaged while the estate is in process. Insurance doesn't cover personal property the same way when ownership is in transition." I started feeling like a guest in my own house. Every time Rebecca visited, something else would be missing when she left. She always had explanations: storage for safekeeping, professional appraisals, insurance requirements, legal necessities. But the explanations were getting more complicated, and she was starting to sound impatient when I asked questions. "Look, I know this is confusing," she said one afternoon after I'd noticed that Mom's china cabinet was gone. "But you need to trust me. I'm the one with experience in real estate and property law. I'm the one who's taken time off work to handle all this bureaucratic nonsense. I'm trying to protect your inheritance." The way she said "your inheritance" made it sound like she was doing me a huge favor instead of just following our parents' will. Things escalated when I got a call from someone claiming to be from the county tax assessor's office. "We need to schedule an inspection of the property on Maple Street," the woman said. "There's been a change in ownership status, and we need to reassess the property." "What kind of change in ownership?" I asked. "According to our records, the property was recently transferred to Hartwell Family Trust. We just need to verify exterior and basic property details for reassessment." After I hung up, I called Rebecca immediately. "Oh, that," she said when I told her about the call. "Yeah, that's part of the estate process I mentioned. The property has to be held in trust temporarily while everything gets sorted out. Don't worry about it. I'll handle the inspection." "But why do they need to come out at all? I thought reassessment was mostly paperwork." A pause. "It's complicated. When there's an estate transfer, they sometimes reassess everything to make sure the tax valuation is accurate. It's just a formality." But her voice sounded different, less patient, more defensive. "Look, I've been handling this stuff for weeks while you've been sitting around in that house doing nothing," she snapped. "Maybe you could show a little appreciation instead of questioning every single thing I do." The comment stung, partly because it reminded me of every childhood argument we'd ever had. Rebecca had always been quick to point out when I wasn't contributing enough, wasn't doing enough, wasn't grateful enough for everything she did. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "I know you're trying to help." "I'm not trying to help," she said. "I am helping. There's a difference." After we hung up, I sat in the increasingly empty living room and tried to figure out why everything felt wrong. Rebecca was handling complicated legal stuff that I didn't understand. She was taking time away from her own life and career to deal with bureaucratic paperwork. She was protecting valuable items from potential damage or theft. Everything she was doing made logical sense. So why did I feel like I was losing control of my own life? The breaking point came when I tried to pay the property taxes and discovered that I couldn't access the account. "The payment system shows that this property is not associated with your social security number," the automated phone system informed me. "Please contact the office during business hours for assistance." When I called during business hours, the clerk was confused. "According to our records, property taxes for 1247 Maple Street are handled through Hartwell Family Trust," she said. "The trustee is listed as Rebecca Hartwell. Are you an authorized representative of the trust?" "I'm the owner of the house." "Sir, our records show that the property was transferred to the trust 3 weeks ago. If you believe there's an error, you'll need to contact the trustee or provide documentation showing your ownership claim." I hung up and immediately called Rebecca. "Why can't I pay my own property taxes?" "Because technically, you don't own the property yet," she said, her voice taking on that patient, condescending tone she'd perfected over the years. "Remember? Everything has to go through the estate first. I'm handling all the financial obligations until the transfer is complete." "When will the transfer be complete?" "Soon. These things take time. Government bureaucracy, you know?" "How much time?" A longer pause. "I don't know exactly. Maybe a few more weeks, maybe a couple of months. It depends on how quickly the various offices process everything." "Months?" "Look, I know you're anxious to get everything finalized," Rebecca said, "but rushing the legal process could cause problems that take even longer to fix. You need to be patient." Patient. I'd been patient my entire life. Patient while Rebecca got piano lessons and college tutoring. Patient while I took care of our aging parents. Patient while she built her career and I put my life on hold. Now I was supposed to be patient while she handled the inheritance that was rightfully mine. "Can I at least see copies of all the paperwork?" I asked. "I want to understand what's happening." "Of course," she said quickly. "I'll bring you copies of everything this weekend. We can go through it all together." But when the weekend came, Rebecca had an excuse. Her husband was having surgery and she needed to stay in California. She'd reschedule for the following weekend. The following weekend, it was a work emergency. A major deal was closing and she couldn't leave town. The weekend after that, she said she had food poisoning and couldn't travel. By then, I'd noticed that Mom's good silver was missing, and Dad's coin collection, and the family photos that had hung in the hallway for as long as I could remember. When I called to ask about them, Rebecca sounded annoyed. "Everything valuable is being stored safely until the estate is settled," she said. "I've told you this already. Why do you keep asking the same questions?" "Because things keep disappearing." "Things aren't disappearing. They're being professionally managed as estate assets." "There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "The difference is that I'm trying to protect your inheritance while you're sitting around being paranoid and ungrateful." The word ungrateful hit like a slap. It was the same word she'd used when we were kids, and I'd complained about having to do extra chores while she got special privileges. "I'm not being ungrateful," I said. "I just want to understand what's happening with my own house." "Your house?" Rebecca's voice turned cold. "Let me remind you that technically it's not your house yet. And the way you've been acting lately, maybe it's time to reconsider whether you're really ready for this kind of responsibility." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. She was suggesting that my inheritance might be in jeopardy if I didn't stop asking questions. After we hung up, I walked through the half-empty house and tried to figure out how I'd ended up here. 3 months ago, I'd inherited the family home. Now I couldn't even pay the property taxes, and my sister was threatening to somehow take away my inheritance if I didn't stop being ungrateful. I pulled out the copy of the will that the lawyer had given me and read through it again, looking for any clause that might give Rebecca the power to revoke my inheritance. There wasn't one. The language was clear. The house was left to me, not to both of us, not to an estate trust, not with any conditions about Rebecca's approval. Just to me. So why was she acting like she had control over whether I'd actually get it? That question kept me awake for 3 nights straight. By Thursday morning, I'd made a decision. I was going to get my own lawyer. I found Gerald Brennan through a Google search for estate law attorneys. His office was in a strip mall 20 minutes from the house, squeezed between a tax preparation service and a nail salon. Not exactly the prestigious law firm Rebecca would have chosen, but his reviews were good, and his consultation fee was something I could actually afford. Brennan was probably in his 60s, with reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck and stacks of case files covering every surface of his cramped office. He looked like the kind of lawyer who actually read documents instead of just skimming them. "So your sister is handling your parents' estate," he said after I'd explained the situation, "and you're concerned about some of the paperwork you signed. I'm concerned that I can't pay my own property taxes, I said. According to the county, I don't own my house anymore. Brennan's eyebrows went up. But the will left the house to you specifically? Yes, the lawyer read it out loud. James Connor receives full ownership of the family residence at 1247 Maple Street. And you have a copy of this will? I handed him the document. He read through it carefully, making notes on a legal pad. This is pretty straightforward, he said finally. There's no mention of any trust, no conditions, no requirement for estate processing. The house should have transferred directly to you upon your parents' death. But Rebecca said everything had to go through the estate first. That's not accurate. Some assets might need to go through probate, but real property specifically bequeathed to a named beneficiary typically transfers directly, especially when the language is this clear. Brennan leaned back in his chair. I'd like to see copies of everything you signed. Rebecca has all the paperwork. She keeps saying she'll bring me copies, but something always comes up. Mr. Connor, I need you to listen to me very carefully. If you signed documents transferring property ownership without understanding what you were signing, and if your sister has been removing items from the house without your permission, we may be looking at fraud. The word hit me like cold water. Fraud. Not miscommunication or bureaucratic confusion. Fraud. What do I do? First, we need to see exactly what you signed. Second, we need to document everything that's missing from the house. And third, we need to get copies of any property transfers or trust documents from the county recorder's office. I spent that afternoon making a list of everything I could remember disappearing from the house. The grandfather clock, Mom's china cabinet, Dad's tools, the antique mirrors, Mom's jewelry, the silver, Dad's coin collection, the family photos. The list filled 3 pages. Friday morning, Brennan and I drove to the county courthouse together. The clerk who'd helped me before recognized me and pulled up the property records for Maple Street. Here's the original deed showing your parents as owners, she said, pointing at the computer screen. And here's the transfer that was filed 3 weeks ago. Brennan studied the screen. This shows the property being transferred from James Connor to Hartwell Family Trust. When did you inherit the house, Mr. Connor? About 6 weeks ago. So there should be a transfer from your parents to you first, before any transfer to a trust. He turned to the clerk. Can you show us all transfers for this property in the last 2 months? The clerk clicked through several screens. That's odd. I don't see any transfer from the parents to Mr. Connor. It looks like the property went directly from the parents to the trust, with Mr. Connor signing as, let me see, as the heir apparent. Brennan and I exchanged glances. Can we get copies of all the transfer documents? He asked. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in Brennan's car reviewing a stack of photocopied forms. My signature was on every page, but the documents weren't what Rebecca had told me they were. This isn't estate paperwork, Brennan said, pointing to the first page. This is you waiving your inheritance rights and transferring the property directly to your sister's trust. I stared at the document. The legal language was dense and confusing, but the intent was clear. I had signed away my inheritance. She told me it was temporary, I said. She said everything had to go through the estate first. Mr. Connor, the house didn't need to pass through an estate trust. According to these documents, you waived your inheritance rights and transferred the property to your sister's trust before title passed to you. On paper, it skipped you entirely. The world seemed to tilt sideways. But the will left you the house, but you signed it away before you ever took possession of it. We drove back to Brennan's office in silence. I felt like an idiot, a complete trusting idiot who'd been played by his own sister. What can I do? I asked once we were back in his office. That depends. If we can prove that you were deceived about what you were signing, we might be able to challenge the transfer, but we'd need evidence that your sister deliberately misrepresented the documents. She told me they were estate forms. Do you have any record of that? Emails, text messages, recorded conversations? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my text history with Rebecca. Most of our conversations had been phone calls, but there were a few messages. Here, I said, showing Brennan a text from 2 weeks earlier. She wrote, need a few more signatures for estate paperwork. Can you print and sign the PDFs I emailed? Brennan studied the message. This is helpful, but we need more. Do you still have the emails with the PDFs she sent? I opened my email and found the messages from Rebecca. Each one had subject lines like, estate documents for signature, and additional probate forms. These email subject lines support your claim that she misrepresented the documents, Brennan said, but we need to understand the full scope of what's happening here. He made some notes. You said items are missing from the house. If your sister is selling property that legally belongs to the trust, we need to trace those sales. How do we do that? We start with online auction sites and local estate sale companies. Your sister probably isn't selling valuable items through classified ads. She's likely using legitimate channels that keep records. That weekend, I spent hours searching eBay, auction house websites, and estate sale listings. On Sunday afternoon, I found what I was looking for. Mom's china cabinet was listed on an auction site, described as a beautiful antique oak china cabinet from estate sale. The seller was listed as Hartwell Estate Sales. I clicked through the photos. It was definitely Mom's cabinet. I recognized the small chip on the back corner where Dad had bumped it with a vacuum cleaner years ago. Listing after listing popped up. Coins, the grandfather clock, Mom's jewelry, each stamped sold under Hartwell Estate Sales. All sold by Hartwell Estate Sales. I called Brennan immediately. This is evidence of conversion, he said, after I told him what I'd found. She's selling property that legally belongs to the trust. Even if the trust is legitimate, she can't just liquidate assets without proper documentation and beneficiary notification. What does that mean? It means we can file a complaint. But first, I want to take a closer look at the original will. Sometimes there are provisions that aren't immediately obvious. Monday morning, Brennan called the lawyer who'd handled my parents' estate. I'd like to request a complete copy of the will for Connor, he told the receptionist. Not just the summary that was read at the will reading, but the entire document including any codicils or amendments. An hour later, Brennan called me back. Can you come to my office this afternoon? There's something in your parents' will that I think you need to see. I drove to his office, my mind racing through possibilities. Had my parents included some provision that gave Rebecca control over over my inheritance? Had they changed their minds about leaving me the house? Brennan was waiting with a thick document spread across his desk. Your parents' will is more complex than what was read at the will reading, he said. There are several codicils, amendments, that were added over the years. He pointed to a section near the end of the document. This codicil was added 18 months ago. It specifically addresses attempts to contest or manipulate the inheritance. I read the paragraph he was pointing to. In the event that any beneficiary attempts to contest, circumvent, or fraudulently obtain assets bequeathed to another beneficiary, said beneficiary shall forfeit all rights to any inheritance, monetary or otherwise, under this will. Such forfeiture shall be absolute and irrevocable. What does that mean? I asked. Brennan smiled for the first time since I'd met him. It means that if we can prove your sister defrauded you into signing over your inheritance, she loses everything. Not just her claim to the house, but her entire inheritance from your parents. Everything? Everything. Her share of the bank accounts, investments, personal property, all of it would be forfeited. I stared at the document. Did she know about this codicil? According to the lawyer's notes, all beneficiaries were supposed to be notified of any changes to the will, but let's find out for sure. Brennan called the estate lawyer again. After a brief conversation, he hung up and turned to me. Rebecca requested and received a complete copy of the will, including all codicils 2 weeks after your parents' funeral. She knew exactly what would happen if she got caught trying to steal your inheritance. The pieces were falling into place. Rebecca hadn't just stolen from me on impulse. She'd planned this carefully, knowing the risks and thinking she was smart enough to get away with it. So what do we do now? I asked. Now we file a complaint with the court and request an emergency injunction to stop any further asset sales. And then we prepare for a very interesting conversation with your sister. Brennan filed the paperwork on Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, Rebecca was blowing up my phone. What is wrong with you? She screamed the moment I answered. I just got served with legal papers at my office, in front of my colleagues. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I hired a lawyer, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. He explained that what you did was fraud. Fraud? Are you out of your mind? I've been trying to help you, and this is how you repay me? You stole my house. I didn't steal anything. Everything I did was legal. You signed those papers willingly, because you lied to me about what they were. A pause. When Rebecca spoke again, her voice had shifted to that patient, condescending tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. Look, I understand you're confused about the legal process. It's complicated, and maybe I didn't explain everything as clearly as I should have. But accusing me of fraud? That's just insane. You told me the documents were estate paperwork. They were property transfer forms. The estate had to be processed before the property could be transferred to you. I was protecting your interests. By transferring the house to yourself? To a trust. There's a difference, and it was temporary, like I told you. Even now, caught red-handed, she was still trying to gaslight me, still trying to make me believe that stealing my inheritance was somehow for my own good. What about the furniture you sold? I asked. Another pause, longer this time. What furniture? Mom's china cabinet, Dad's coin collection, the grandfather clock. I found the auction listings. Those items needed to be liquidated to pay estate expenses. Storage fees, appraisal costs, legal fees. I was going to reimburse you once everything was settled. You were going to reimburse me for my own furniture? The trust's furniture. Legally, those items belonged to the estate until the transfer was complete. She had an answer for everything. Even when confronted with evidence of her theft, she twisted every fact to make herself sound like the responsible party managing complex legal requirements. I'm flying out tomorrow, she said. We're going to sit down and sort this out like adults, and you're going to call off your lawyer before this gets any more out of hand. I'm not calling off anything. You will if you know what's good for you. Do you have any idea how much this legal battle is going to cost? Do you really want to spend your entire inheritance on attorney fees just to prove some paranoid point? The threat was clear. She was betting that I'd back down rather than fight, just like I'd always done when we were kids. I'll see you tomorrow, I said, and hung up. Thursday morning, Rebecca arrived at the house with a leather briefcase and the kind of fake smile she usually reserved for difficult real estate clients. Let's put all this unpleasantness behind us, she said, settling onto the living room couch like she owned the place, which, technically, she did. I brought copies of all the paperwork so we can clear up any confusion. She spread documents across the coffee table with practiced efficiency. Here's the trust agreement. Here are the estate processing forms. Here's the timeline for transferring everything back to your name. I looked at the papers but didn't touch them. My lawyer wants to see all of this. Your lawyer is just trying to run up billable hours. This is family business, not something that needs to be settled in court. You made it legal business when you committed fraud. Rebecca's smile faltered for just a moment. I didn't commit anything. I followed proper estate procedures to protect your inheritance. If you'd just been patient instead of jumping to paranoid conclusions. Patient. You've been stealing from me for 2 months. I haven't stolen anything. The fake smile disappeared completely. Everything I took was for appraisal or safe storage. I have receipts for everything. You have auction receipts because you sold it all. Rebecca's face went through several emotions. Surprise, anger, calculation, before settling on righteous indignation. Fine. Yes, I sold some items, but only to cover estate expenses. Storage fees, insurance, legal costs. Do you think all this estate management happens for free? What legal costs? You said you were handling everything yourself. I had to consult with attorneys about proper procedures. I had to pay for appraisals and storage and insurance. Someone had to be the responsible adult here. She was digging herself deeper with every word, but she seemed genuinely convinced that she was the victim in this situation. Here's what's going to happen, Rebecca continued, pulling out a new set of papers from her briefcase. I'm willing to transfer the house back to you immediately. No more trust, no more estate processing. You sign these forms, and the property goes directly into your name. I looked at the documents. They looked official, covered with legal terminology and signature lines. In exchange, Rebecca said, you dropped this ridiculous fraud complaint, and we split the proceeds from the items I sold to cover estate expenses. What proceeds? You spent the money on estate expenses. Well, what's left after expenses? inferences. Look, I'm trying to be fair here. I could keep everything since you technically signed it over to me, but I'm willing to work with you because we're family. The audacity was breathtaking. She was offering to give me back my own house in exchange for dropping the fraud charges and letting her keep the money from selling my parents' belongings. I need to show these to my lawyer, I said. You don't need a lawyer for this. It's a simple property transfer. Just sign here, here, and here. She was holding out a pen, pointing to signature lines, using the exact same tone she'd used 2 months earlier when she'd convinced me to sign away my inheritance in the first place. I'm not signing anything without my lawyer reviewing it first. Rebecca's mask slipped completely. You know what? I'm done trying to help you. You want to drag this through the courts? Fine. We'll see how much of your inheritance is left after you pay legal fees for the next 2 years. A knock sounded at the front door. Come in, I said. Brennan stepped into the living room, a manila folder in his hands. Mr. Brennan, I said. Thanks for fitting me in this morning, he said, nodding to Rebecca. Ms. Hartwell, I presume? Rebecca stood up, trying to regain her composure. And you are? Gerald Brennan, Mr. Connor's attorney. I've been looking forward to meeting you. I don't see why. This is a simple family matter that doesn't require legal intervention. Brennan smiled. Ms. Hartwell, you're facing allegations of fraud, theft by deception, and conversion of assets, with potential financial exploitation under review. I'd hardly call that a simple family matter. Those charges are ridiculous. Everything I did was legal. Really? Because I have documentation showing that you misrepresented legal documents to your brother, fraudulently obtained property transfers, and converted estate assets for personal use. He opened his folder. I also have a copy of your parents' will, including the codicil that you're apparently familiar with. Rebecca's face went white. What codicil? The one that strips you of your entire inheritance if you attempt to defraud your brother, which, according to the evidence we've gathered, is exactly what you did. I didn't defraud anyone. I was protecting the estate. By selling items through Hartwell estate sales, by transferring property to a trust you control, by lying to your brother about the nature of the documents he was signing. Rebecca looked back and forth between Brennan and me, her confidence crumbling. This is all a misunderstanding. I can explain everything. I'm sure you can, Brennan said, and you'll have plenty of opportunity to do that in court. But first, I have some good news for Mr. Connor. He pulled out another set of papers. I filed for a temporary restraining order this morning to freeze any further transfers and sales. The court granted the TRO and set a hearing for Friday. I stared at him. So what happens now? On Friday, we'll present the evidence. If the judge agrees, the court will void the transfer and return title to you. Rebecca sank back onto the couch. You can't do that. I have rights. You had rights, Brennan corrected. Rights that you forfeited when you chose to commit fraud against your brother. And according to the codicil in your parents' will, you've also forfeited your inheritance. The codicil doesn't apply here. I didn't contest the will. You circumvented it through fraud. The legal effect is the same. Rebecca turned to me, her face desperate. You can't let them do this. I'm your sister. We can work something out. For the first time in my life, I looked at Rebecca and felt nothing but pity. She'd thrown away our relationship, her inheritance, and probably her real estate license, all for a house and some antique furniture. You should probably get your own lawyer, I said. I don't need a lawyer. This is all a huge misunderstanding. But Brennan was already packing up his papers. Ms. Hartwell, I'd recommend you stop talking and start looking for legal representation. The district attorney's office will probably want to discuss criminal charges. As he said the word criminal, Rebecca finally seemed to understand that her explanations and justifications weren't going to work anymore. The carefully constructed story about estate procedures and legal requirements had crumbled under the weight of actual evidence. This isn't over, she said, grabbing her briefcase and heading for the door. But we all knew it was. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my living room, my actual living room in my actual house, reading the final paperwork from Brennan's office. After the Friday hearing, the court voided the transfer and restored title to me. The injunction on the Hartwell Family Trust stayed in place during the case. The fraud case is officially closed. Rebecca pleaded guilty to avoid criminal trial and was sentenced to 2 years probation and restitution for the items she sold. She lost her real estate license, her inheritance, and according to mutual friends, her marriage. Her husband apparently didn't appreciate being dragged into a criminal fraud case. The restitution payments are slowly bringing back pieces of my parents' legacy. I've managed to track down and repurchase some of the items Rebecca sold. Mom's china cabinet cost me $1,400 to buy back from the auction winner, but it's sitting in the dining room where it belongs. I'll never get everything back. Some items sold to private collectors who have no interest in selling. Dad's coin collection disappeared into the hands of someone in another state who won't respond to calls or letters. But the house is mine, completely and legally, and that's what matters most. The funny thing is, I understand now why my parents structured the will the way they did. They'd watched Rebecca manipulate situations her entire life, always finding ways to twist things to her advantage. The codicil wasn't just about protecting my inheritance. It was about protecting me from her. They knew she'd try something. They just made sure she'd destroy herself in the process. Brennan says my parents probably added that codicil after Dad's stroke, when they realized how much Rebecca stayed away while I handled everything. It was their way of acknowledging what I'd sacrificed and ensuring Rebecca couldn't steal it away through legal maneuvering. Your parents were smarter than your sister gave them credit for, Brennan told me when we reviewed the final settlement. They knew exactly who their children were. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. For 28 years, I believed my parents didn't see me, didn't value what I did, didn't appreciate the sacrifices I made, but they saw everything. They just showed their appreciation in the only way that mattered, by making sure Rebecca couldn't take it away from me. The house feels different now, not just because half the furniture is missing, but because it's truly mine. I'm not the caretaker anymore, not the backup child managing everyone else's needs. I'm the homeowner, making my own decisions about what stays and what goes, what gets repaired and what gets replaced. I've started dating someone, a woman I met at the hardware store when I was buying supplies to fix the upstairs bathroom. She knows the whole story about Rebecca, and she doesn't think I'm crazy for for trusting my sister, or stupid for not seeing the signs earlier. Family manipulation is the hardest kind to spot, she told me. When someone's been gaslighting you since childhood, their lies sound like truth. Rebecca tried to contact me a few months ago. A long email about how sorry she was, how she'd made terrible decisions, how she hoped we could rebuild our relationship someday. She claimed the stress of her divorce and career problems had made her act irrationally. I deleted the email without responding. Brennan warned me that she might try this, the apology tour, designed to make me feel guilty for pursuing legal action. But I've learned to recognize manipulation now, even when it comes wrapped in remorse and family obligation. The truth is, Rebecca isn't sorry she stole from me. She's sorry she got caught. She's sorry there were consequences. If her plan had worked, if I'd never hired a lawyer, she'd be living in California right now with an extra $400,000 in real estate profit and a clear conscience. I'm not interested in rebuilding a relationship based on her convenience and my forgiveness. Some people think I'm being too harsh. A few family friends have suggested that I should consider reconciliation, that family is more important than money, that Rebecca made a mistake and deserves a second chance. But this wasn't a mistake. Mistakes are accidental. This was a calculated scheme that required months of planning, lies, and manipulation. Rebecca researched estate law, set up a fake trust, created a business entity for selling stolen goods, and systematically deceived me about every aspect of the process. The only mistake she made was underestimating our parents' foresight. I think about Mom and Dad sometimes, wondering what they'd think about how everything turned out. Part of me wishes they were here to see Rebecca face consequences for once in her life. But another part of me is grateful they didn't have to watch their family destroy itself. They did what they could. They left me the house, included the codicil, and trusted that I'd eventually find the strength to protect myself. It just took me longer than it should have. The house is quiet now in a way it never was when I was growing up. No medical equipment humming, no pill alarms beeping, no worried conversations about doctor appointments and insurance coverage. For the first time in years, the quiet feels peaceful instead of empty. I've turned Mom and Dad's bedroom into a home office. I kept some of their furniture, the dresser where Mom kept her scarves, the reading chair where Dad spent his last good years working crossword puzzles. But I've added my own things too. A new desk, a better lamp, bookshelves filled with my own books instead of medical manuals and prescription guides. It's my space now, my life, my choices. Rebecca taught me something valuable, even though she didn't mean to. She showed me that being family doesn't automatically make someone trustworthy, that love without respect is meaningless, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a manipulator is to let them face the consequences of their actions. She also taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was. For most of my life, I believed I was the weak one, the pushover, the person who couldn't stand up for himself. But when it mattered most, I found my voice. I hired a lawyer, gathered evidence, and fought back. I won. The house is finally, completely, unquestionably mine. Not because Rebecca decided to give it back, not because some legal loophole worked in my favor, but because I fought for what was rightfully mine and refused to be manipulated into giving up. That might be the most valuable thing my parents left me. Not the house itself, but the opportunity to discover that I was capable of protecting it. Sometimes late at night, when I'm walking through the rooms where I grew up, I think I can hear them. Not literally, but the echoes of the people they were before illness changed everything. Dad laughing at something on TV, Mom humming while she cooked dinner, the sound of a family that was happy before it became complicated. Those memories belong to me now, along with everything else. Rebecca can't sell them at auction or transfer them to a trust or claim they're part of some legal process she's managing. They're mine to keep.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop your favorite part in the comments. See you in the next one.